Welcome to the Inner Headspace podcast. I'm doing this intro after I finished talking the whole way because I wasn't sure if I was actually going to use this as an episode, but it ended up being interesting in my opinion and helpful and long enough in my opinion. So, we'll just cut right into the show and enjoy. I just feel like talking because I feel like it, and it's just me. So, I guess it's about processing emotions. I just think it's interesting when we're thinking through something, trying to process it. It's really hard to get that sinking feeling, I guess, out of the pit of your stomach. And everyone has their different methods, even distractions and stuff. What I'm noticing is, like, for me, my go-to is listening to a song that, like, basically spells out what I'm feeling for me and puts it into words. I find that to be super, I guess, cathartic. And I was doing that, and I was just listening to music, and I was just thinking, like, kind of want to talk about it. So, I don't know how long this is going to be. It's going to be way more, like, ranty. And since I'm by myself, it's like, and I'm also in a really squeaky chair. But since I'm by myself, it's probably going to go super, like, off the rails or whatever. But I guess where I was wanting to start was, like, the different stages, I guess. And it's like you feel something, and then you start to think about what you're feeling, whether it be excitement or sadness or anger or whatever. Like, could be, this goes, I feel like, for any emotion. Doesn't have to be negative. But you feel it, and then it's like you get your initial reaction, and then that lasts about 5 minutes. And then you go into the next stage, which is like trying to understand what's going on. And then following that is like this period of, like, residual emotion, I guess you could put it, where it's like, whether it be anxiousness or anxiety or excitement / anxiety, and or it can be like a pit in your stomach where it's like you're trying not to think about the thing, and then you think about it and you're like, oh yeah, and then, like, and that feeling just doesn't go away. And for me, I feel like I said before, what helps me is listening to something and having someone basically convey it for you. But I think what's interesting is, like, how does, I guess it's never been a conscious thing, at least for me, like, what's after that? Do you just keep listening to something until you're satisfied, or is it like you start to accept or reconcile or calm down or whatever? And I just think it's interesting, like, you get blasted, I guess your brain gets blasted with all of these emotions, and you, like, are overwhelmed, and you get to the point where you're like, well, I don't even know what I'm feeling, because I'm feeling like 6 different things, but I'm trying to feel like I'm okay, even if you're, like, not fully good. And then I go and listen to music, and then I'm like, yeah, okay, I feel like this is what I'm feeling. And then it's like, now what? Like, okay, I know I'm feeling it. I know, for the most part, my, like, I can name the feeling I'm feeling, but like, how do you, I guess, pinpoint like what? I don't know. I'm like I said, I'm just rambling, but I just think it's interesting the way people process stuff. And it can take a couple minutes to like a couple hours to like a couple days even, or even weeks or whatever. But I've always found it fascinating. Like me personally, I've always been one to internalize my thoughts and internalize the way I think about something. But then you mix in other factors like, say something's upsetting you and you're getting anxiety from it. And then it's like, okay, well, why am I getting anxiety from this? And then you think about it, you're like, oh, it must be because I'm insecure about this one thing, or like I'm super scared of this thing, or I'm uncomfortable or whatever. And you just go, once you realize it's one of those other factors, it's like, it just feels like a strange, like a loss for what to do, how to like fix it, even though it's not always good to just immediately fix something. There's always that want to be like, I want this to not be happening right now, but it is. And I don't know. I'm talking in circles, but this is why I wanted to just like jump on and just kind of brain vomit these thoughts that I was having. And you can really like, I think the hard part, I guess, or like what can be damaging or challenging or whatever, is like you can get yourself stuck in a loop where you're upset or anxious about something, and then you do whatever coping you do, and then all of a sudden it's like it's still there and it still comes back, and then it's like, oh. And I feel like a lot of the time it's just you're just waiting for that feeling to go away. But if you're too conscious of it, then the feeling never goes away because it's constantly re-triggering itself. But if you distract yourself, it's gone temporarily, and then it comes back, and it just starts over again. And maybe that's just anxiety and not everybody. Like it's people with more anxiety than normal. Or it could be like, I don't know if that's like a normal natural thing or if it's specific circumstances, but I just find it fascinating that like it's so easy to talk to other people about something they're doing or going through or whatever and be like, oh, is this? And from my experience and blah, blah, blah. And then it's like, you go and try to apply that same thing to yourself and you're like, oh, like it works, but it doesn't, because now I'm aware of what I'm doing. And I don't know, it's fascinating because it's hard when you're feels like you're getting followed by a feeling and you need to shake it, but you can't. And there's nothing you can do, and it just sticks and sticks, and like it just doesn't go away. And I just find it fascinating. There's no real way to like deal with it, I don't think. Well, there likely is. Obviously, there's therapy and stuff like that. I'm saying like it's hard as far as like there's no one bandage fix for everything or something like that. Like it's there, and that's all there is to it. And it's just interesting. And another thing popped in my head, which I guess would just be no smooth transition or anything. It's just jumping to the next thing. I think it kind of goes in hand with like, I guess, what would you call that? for some reason, the only thing I think of is like forgiveness. And does forgiving somebody help that person, or doesn't it? I think that's also really hard, because it can feel like, oh, well, it's okay because of this. And then it's like, yeah, but that doesn't fix anything and help them, really, honestly, like, unless it's the one thing they're looking for, which I feel like oftentimes it's not. And then you got to think for yourself, like, does that help me? Does it help me to vocalize that? Does that make me feel better? And again, it's like, I guess it depends, but it's just really weird the way, I guess, people can communicate and process their own emotions. Surprisingly, like, not surprisingly at this point, but it's almost ironic. Our biggest, I guess, thing that makes us unique as humans is our capacity for emotion, our capacity for empathy and things like that. Yet we don't even know how to control it naturally. Like, and maybe we do on some sort of like primal level, but like not adapted well for our current society, at the very least. Like, there's so many things that actively push against us in society where it's like, I think that's what causes these loops, and that's what causes all this stuff. And I think I don't even think we hold the answer to like one of the biggest questions, which is like, what do I do? How do I I'm going through this hard thing. How do I process this? How do I get through it? How do I move on? How do I, like, there's no blanket answer, and I don't even think there is any answer. Like, some people, you just, like, sometimes you just can't get over something, and sometimes you can get over it super fast. And I don't think it comes down to the method in which you use, or the method in which you actively take to do so. I think it's like you have to, depending on how much time, I think the end goal isn't, oh, I have to get over it. It's like, you need to feel comfortable in your own head with this thing. You need to feel like good about like what you're feeling. That didn't make sense. You need to feel good about the thing that you're having trouble processing through. And even just saying words and just talking about it, I feel like is a very underrated method to handle things. And it's a very powerful way to help put into words, quite literally, how you're feeling. And if you don't have somebody to talk to or something like that, like, it can still help, I guess, to write it down and read it, or just say things out loud or into a recording, I guess, like this, like on your phone or something. And take the time to, like, get it from your brain into thoughts, and then from thoughts into words, because there's still a translation point that happens with words, and it helps you really, like, express yourself. And I think a lot of the struggle comes from people trying to express their emotions and trying to translate it. Like, I think a lot of people get caught up in the translation part of taking what's in their head and turn it into words, because our, I guess, natural way of doing it is taking it from our head and putting it into emotions and actions. And that's how we can go from, like, processing something to like really mad, really sad, really happy, really like an extreme emotion, because we haven't given ourselves the opportunity to take it from in our head to the thoughts, and then from the thoughts to the words. And it's really hard because sometimes it feels like there's peanut butter in your mouth, like you can't speak. And I think that's where it's really helpful to write it, at least. Like, it's way easier to write than try to speak in those situations, I think. And I think that's super important to, like, we've talked about communication in the past on this show, but like, I think communication with other people is just as important as communication with yourself. Communicating with your own brain, like your own emotions, taking that and kind of flipping a mirror on itself and looking inward and being like, I'm feeling this way because of this. I'm allowed to feel this way because of this. Maybe I shouldn't feel this way because of these reasons. And I think it's hard because if you're in a state of guilt, let's say, and you're flipping that mirror and you're like, I feel upset in this way, and I'm expressing myself in this way, but I can't come to an understanding with myself and an explanation / reasoning because of its very nature. It's guilt. It's like, oh, I did this thing wrong. And then people can get, and it's like almost an extreme version of what I was talking about earlier, where like you're stuck in a loop again, but instead of like, oh, I'm upset because this thing happened out of my control, it's like, I'm upset because I did this thing and I can't undo the thing. And now I'm stuck in a loop of trying to like convince myself that like I'm okay, or not trying to convince yourself, and you're like battering yourself, you know? And I think it's tricky. And I've said this before, but it's important that you react naturally. You don't suppress your reactions. You react appropriately, but you need to react naturally. Understand that you reacted a certain way. And then the next step is what I've been talking about, which is the internalizing part. But I think that's way too vague and general, honestly. Like, what does internalizing mean? What does self-reflection mean? What does looking inward mean? Like, honestly, they could just be buzzwords, you know? But I'd say my description of self-reflection and looking inwards is communicating with yourself in a way where you seek to understand what is going on in your head. Excuse me. So whether that be through listening to a song or music that helps almost translate that for you, or writing it down, just your raw, plain thoughts, and looking at them and seeing them visibly and being like, oh, okay, I feel this way because of this, or reading a book or watching a show. Like, I think our first instinct is try to be comfortable. We're in an uncomfortable spot and we need to get comfortable quick because I don't like this feeling. And everybody does it. I do it for sure. And like, it's not like a bad or negative reaction to have, but I also feel like you got to have that for a little bit, and then you need to like excuse me, you need to like get back on track, I guess, into like that process. And you need to get to the point where you need to feel comfortable in your own skin. You need to feel good about yourself. And it's hard to do that when you're like upset at yourself for doing something. And I think it's, I don't know. I just thought about it. Like, I know when I go through feelings of guilt or like something like that, like, oh, I messed up, I did this thing wrong. Obviously, step one is like admit it, and like if you can get to that point, like that's really good. And you get to and then the next stage is like, okay, well, why did I do this? All right, was that okay? Yes or no? No. Then like, how can I, what is the root of my feeling? How can I reconcile? How can I take this thing inside of me and like try to regain my own emotional control back with it without ignoring it? And that's the challenge. That's the unanswered question. And that's what I mean by like this thing that makes us so unique. It makes us human, is something that is almost impossible to master. It's almost impossible to genuinely understand and feel and like communicate with yourself. But emotions drive our very being. It drives the way we think, our actions. It drives our relationships. It drives everything, every single part and aspect of our life. And we can't even control it. And it feels so random at times where you're like, why did I do this? Oh, because I had this emotional feeling. Or why did I say this? Or why did I react this way? Oh, because it was an impulse emotional reaction. Oh, I got in a fight with some guy at the store. Why did I say the things I said? Oh, because I was really offended, or I felt unsafe. I felt like, I think it's important to like, it sounds so simple and almost like meaningless, but I think it's so powerful to be able to like explain to yourself what's going on. I said it before with like the goals thing. Why are you going to college? Why are you buying this thing? Like, why are you doing this thing? Don't justify it, but explain it to yourself. Why did I do this thing? And if you can better understand, you're going to bring up your own self-confidence in the fact that like, okay, I'm standing on solid ground. I'm not up in the air as to why things are happening. Like, I have at least a little ounce of control over what I'm feeling and doing. And I think when it comes, circling back around to that guilt/regret type of thing, I think that one takes more time than usual. Other than like, I'd say grieving is another one kind of like that, where it feels so like you can't undo it. It feels so permanent that like you feel helpless. You feel like, what do I do? I literally just have to sink into my emotions and feel it, which is good. I'm not saying that's not good, but I'm saying, how can you take that and work with it? How can you take that and go and push yourself to do what you need to do to, like I said, get to that point where you feel comfortable with yourself again, or comfortable in the world again, you know? Like, it's so important, I feel. And I think like it's cathartic, and it's very calming to not hide from yourself. Don't hide from your emotions. Don't hide from your reasoning for living and doing things. Don't hide from potential negativity or pain, because at the end of the day, like, you're not avoiding it. You can distract yourself from it, but it's happening in the background regardless. Like, you have to like, there are times where you have to face things head on and just do it. And pain is the greatest teacher, I guess. Like, Jared would use the quote, a quote from Yoda at this point, which would be, the greatest teacher failure is. And I feel like that's very true, and it's applicable even when it's your fault, because it's, as long as you're genuine and you genuinely feel like there was a problem, whether you created it or something happened or whatever, like as long as it's a big enough deal to you, it will teach you a lesson whether you want it to or not. And this kind of touches back, we did an episode on lessons of failure and communication. Like this is kind of an amalgamation of all of that, but I want to focus mostly like on the emotion and like why this thing that is very much out of our control, how can you reconcile with that and take it in and kind of implement the logical side, I guess, to help piece things back together in your own head. Because there are times where you feel like you're falling apart and you're breaking at the seams, you know? And I think it's very unlikely for anybody to think with a clear head in very emotional times. But it's important to at least know at the back of your head, like, this is what's happening right now in the moment. That does not mean it's happening all the time, like, permanently, you know? Everybody gets over their hardships as long as they put their mind to it and they believe that they can, and they believe in themselves that they can do what they need to do to get themselves back on their feet. And I guess that's the other unique aspect of human nature, is our will to live. Humans can survive ridiculous feats and extreme hardship and trauma purely because they want to live. And not to say this is on the level of living or dying, but I'm saying, like, if it can do that, then it can help you get through a hard emotional time. It can help you try to push yourself that little extra mile to try to communicate with your own inner self or your own brain, your own emotions, and like truly piece together all of these flying parts that are just scrambling and crashing into each other, you know? And I think I said earlier, I brought up forgiveness, and now I feel like it's more relevant to talk about, but forgiveness is the second half. It's the second half to the guilt thing. And I'm not talking about forgiveness from other people at this point. I'm talking about forgiving yourself. Because like I said about failure, you fail. That has a profound effect on our human brains. Failure, especially when a lot of our society is conditioned to punish failure. And there has to be consequences to failure and lapses and faults. And while there are times where it calls for that, I also feel like that's damaging to someone's ability to forgive themselves. And that's when you truly release it, is when you forgive yourself for anything you feel, that, such as guilt. And I think that's the question. It's easier to help navigate something when you have a destination. And I think at the end of the day, the destination is, how can I forgive myself and not seek that out from other people? Or if you're on the other end and you're not the guilty one, you're the one that's being hurt, I guess at the end of the day, it's how can I forgive the other person and feel comfortable again with my own emotions? And when those two things meet, I think that's when a conflict is genuinely resolved and there's nothing hidden or pent up or being kept. And then that ties into the communication part with other people and within yourself. So I got a little inspiration in my head, and I was like, home alone. I was like, I want to record this. So I'll probably just turn this into a full episode. And yeah, so thank you for listening. And I'm not gonna do any of the plug stuff. Not in the zone for that. So this one's like a half episode, I suppose, but I'll play it out as like this week's episode because I think it's pretty interesting. And Jared and I aren't able to like meet up this week, so I thought I'd hop on and just talk about stuff. So thank you for watching, and bye-bye.